Right.
Mm. We are
We are
live.
on record. We are live. We are live and
we are on the
somewhat alive.
record.
We're on the record now. Heck yeah.
Yeah, sip that nice tea. Not whiskey, guys. Not whiskey, people.
No, yeah, yeah. I realize it looks like whiskey, but it's actually just Red Bull. So I need my wings, man. It's too early in the morning over here. I need those wings, eh?
Sometimes you need the caffeine, you need the wings, you need the.
You do need that boost. You do need that boost, certainly.
That's gonna push you to the moon.
Moon and back, eh? Moon and back.
Yeah. Take that, Elon Musk.
Go the distance, eh? Go the distance.
Yeah. Anyway, over to you.
I don't know. I've said a lot of things. I'm trying to cast my mind back, actually.
We did talk a lot of things.
We did talk about a lot of things. But there seems to be some common themes coming through, I think. So I believe we touched on the topic with clarity last time. And I think something that's probably come through quite clearly, perhaps, is a lot of embedded conflict in society that's coming to the fore now, which is really interesting. And I've been kind of thinking about this, actually, and I don't know where to stand in this, because as you know, as someone who I guess you could call spiritually minded, I'd like to see the good in humanity, but I can't also help but feel a little despondent about what's going on at the moment. So I feel like there's an inner tension going on inside of me, and perhaps this is a metaphor or reflective of the tension that's going on in the outside, because our inner worlds do reflect and mirror our outer worlds, and vice versa, right? So if there's inner chaos, then it will come up to the fore, and if you're around tumultuous events, they will kind of cause an imbalance inside of you. So perhaps finding balance is something that I guess I'm trying to do, keeping level-headed in these times, staying positive. So yeah, that's kind of been bouncing around at the back of my mind. I'm keen to hear what's going on in your mind.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I feel that sometimes we're operating in a way where we have a capacity of ability to operate, and normal days we are kind of like okay, we are getting on with our business. It's stressful, yes, and normally, if you hold on a job and family and also studies and just whatever you're doing, usually you're operating on a close to maximum sort of level. That's usually enough that's required of us, especially if you're working and getting paid for it. So we are kind of at capacity, and then when you have like stuff like the world events that just add on top of that, that's when it starts to overflow and gets really intense. The level of stress gets overwhelming and just can't contain it anymore. So as a result, one thing that I remember from the military that stuck with me in my head was that one of my officers used to say, you really get to know people, who they are, when they are under pressure and under a lot of stress. And when they have like little to no sleep at all, you start to see I wouldn't say the true self. I mean, his words was true self, but it's another side of ourselves that we don't reveal to the world. And in Jungian psychology, we sort of like, associate it, or we term it as the shadow. And that's the thing that we normally keep under wraps, because we don't want to let people see that. You want to let people necessarily see our like dark side, our anger, our chaos, and all that stuff. But when we are overwhelmed by all that things in our life, and plus world events, we have this really deadly, well, not deadly, not technically dying, but we get this overstimulation of stress, and therefore we cannot contain this shadow anymore, and comes out with this like I sort of like give it a personality like a a dark dragon, you know, like whatever it is, like a monster that you can't really contain. So there we have it. COVID, I think, is a really good. It's not really good. It's an event in this year that has really catalyzed all these things. So I think in an earlier conversation we had, it's like, okay, we have a choice then. Do we confront these things that have been laid dormant for so long, or use that opportunity for that, or do we try to like force it under the carpet again and carry on? Like, so it's an opportunity to change things in a more healthy way. But it's interesting in my observation, and I sort of feel it in my own world as well. It's like, do I really want change? Is change that easy? You know, change is traumatic. The change is really hard to do. We are creatures of habit.
Absolutely.
And you know, and when we're given this opportunity as well, we're just like, no, I want things to be normal again so I can carry on my life.
Oh, absolutely. I think it's fair to say that, you know, we all, I guess, enjoy an element of surprise every now and then. But, you know, obviously from time to time, this element of surprise is a little bit unwarranted and perhaps rather unpleasant. And it's fair to say that this year there have been far too many unpleasant surprises. And I guess at some point it wears away at you. At some point you start to lose enthusiasm for this, and you really just want some semblance of normality to hold on to. So yeah, well, I wonder what it's been like for you in terms of your everyday life. How normal or abnormal is it now, especially since I understand that in New Zealand you guys are back in level 3 now, which is interesting. So that's another change that's happening. So how are you? How are people you know responding to this?
I can't speak for everyone out there. I think there was a lot of relief when the last lockdown finished, and so, you know, having this again is like change, but it's almost like it's like you didn't finish class and then you have to start again, you know, kind of thing. What I mean is, like, maybe a lot of things didn't get fully resolved the last time, and now getting to it's like Groundhog Day in a way. So although there's a bit of fatigue that sets in, you know, like a bit of that feeling of like, oh, sheesh, not again. Of course, everyone's reacting differently. There are those who are fatigued by it, and those who depend on having a security of jobs to hold them through this period, especially after the first lockdown. Is really challenging. But there are also others who are feeling like they need a bit of a break as well, and maybe it's an opportunity again to embrace a change. And like I said, you know, it's like, it's really hard. It's harder. It's easier said than done. Because maybe better the devil you know than the devil you don't.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I don't know. I think I get a sense that people who are adapted to it pretty okay. Last round. Really not again. So,
yeah, that's understandable. I mean, so here in the UK, I think it's fair to say that we've had it a lot worse than you guys, and I think lockdown fatigue is starting to really set in for a lot of us. So we began our lockdown just 2 days before you guys in New Zealand did, and we've pretty much just been more or less locked down ever since. For example, you know, there are still certain venues, for example, that remain closed. There are social distancing rules that are enforced quite stringently. You've got to wear masks on public transport and shops and so forth. You know, I can't access my office at the university. That kind of stuff. So we've been having this go on for quite some time, and also with some cities, there's been additional lockdown measures because there have been outbreaks and so forth. So certainly this whole reoccurrence of impositions I think, is starting to take its toll. And I certainly agree with you that when there is a lack of surety, it can be destabilizing. It's like oscillating back and forth between positions, between freedom, lack of freedom, back and forth, new measures, no measures, back and forth. And it's hard to keep track as well. And to an extent, it's also hard to perhaps keep faith in authorities. And so there's so much going on right now. And something I've actually... Your turn, bro.
There's so much politeness going on here, like after you.
There has to be this turn taking. So I think I've rambled on long enough. I want to hear from you, man.
No, I enjoy hearing what you're saying as well, and it saves me from talking too much. And
it's all good.
It's really interesting for two introverts to talk this much together as well. But but okay.
That is a fascinating topic. We should get to that though.
That's a topic for another time. But
that's a topic for another time.
But what you said about the freedoms and stuff, I just came to this very interesting insight about what's confusing about right now. You know how COVID happened, and it just brought out all this like deep-seated stuff. And of course, the big one that came out was Black Lives Matter, and the BLM movement. And so I somewhat make this really weird comparison around like then in the context of government and how they are managing politically these two movements. So if anything, these two events, I'm just reflecting on what they teach us and how we deal with it. And so BLM, what BLM I feel has taught us was about like police brutality and how it impinges on human rights and human freedom, or excess police and just brutality in general. But and quite the opposite. We have the COVID thing where we need to impose some sort of really strict law, like almost like this. I don't know. This talk about martial law, even, or like there was brought up in the newspaper that people were jumping like checkpoints, because Auckland is in lockdown, but the rest of the country isn't, so people are escaping it. But it's not patrolled. And people are saying, no, this is not cool. And when people are escaping the quarantine, who's policing that? So that extent, and so we want to bring in martial law, but that's the complete opposite, just to make people comply with the quarantine, which is for the better good. So we have these two contrasting levels of control. One is like, no, too much control. And another one, we need more control. So, which is, is
absolutely.
How does the government, respond to something like that? Or where do you find the balance?
Wow,
yeah. What we talk about, it's really contradictory.
Dude, it's so tough because you have some very competing concerns here, right? On the one hand, you want to protect the people and their health. At the same time, I guess you want to protect the health of the economy as well, if you want to call it that. So you can't really have both. You cannot have things return to normal and people go to work again and businesses running as per normal while trying to contain this virus. And so what's, I think, really interesting is that whilst this started as a medical issue, it's evolved into a political issue, it's evolved into a social issue, and it's also evolved into an economic issues. So there have been three additional issues that have actually arisen from this, which perhaps you could say was somewhat unforeseen to begin with. And I think there's so much unpredictability going on right now. And I think I wonder if people are just getting worn out. I mean, so much has already been taken away from us, and to think that one more thing is being taken away from us, our freedoms. I think for some, this is the straw that breaks their camel's back, perhaps.
It might also indicate how much we have been trapped we felt trapped over this whole time. Trapped to our jobs to pay the mortgage, trapped with, maybe dysfunctional family, or trapped in dysfunctional relationships. Or it's just a feeling of like, I don't know if I actually have freedom, although it's promised a lot in Western society, like freedom is a big thing. But it's surprising, despite all that perceived freedom, the question remains, like, do we actually have a lot of freedom, or are we actually kind of slave to money or economy, or just trying to survive, and our commitments and all that stuff, like maybe we weren't that free after all. Another one is how free are we to express ourselves without all the fear of judgment around, like you shouldn't do this, you shouldn't do that, no, it's not proper, and then you repress and you trap yourself so much. Every time you let out something and be a bit vulnerable, then someone's gonna put in your place or something, and then you feel shame and guilted into it, and then you just go, well, I might as well just trap myself because it's safe. A friend was talking about building up walls around your heart because you're feeling very vulnerable. And you build thicker and thicker walls to keep things out. But what you're really doing is you're building thicker and thicker walls to surround yourself in, which is freaking prison. So
well, yeah, that's tough. That is tough. I think it's fair to say that the lockdown has compelled us to be indoors far longer than we would otherwise desire. And so we're seeing a situation where individuals who maybe don't really spend a lot of time around each other, or perhaps they do enjoy their alone time or whatever, and they're being forced together. And this might apply to couples, this might apply to families, kids and parents and all that in several generations. And so you have people who have to stick to their allotted bubble, if you like, and they can only really interact with these. And what I think we are seeing and reading and hearing about is that there's certainly a lot of conflict coming through. You're having, I guess, couples argue more, and parents are finding childcare responsibilities far more difficult, can't send them to school and so forth. And it seems to me like there's rising tension happening within the confines of homes, and this is quite worrying because, well, on so many levels really, but certainly on the psychological level, it's starting to impact a lot of people, and it's really worrying.
Yeah. There was a comment in our thread about, our group thread, chat thread, about why isn't the government doing stuff about depression and suicide and isolation and all the knock-on effects. But I feel that it's important stuff, but maybe that argument was about why are we so focusing so much on policing and lockdown? Is that the most effective when there's all these other things going on? I'm thinking, well, in terms of like priorities, like triage. What's the emergency? When someone goes into surgery for heart bypass, then the treatment for their cancer should wait. It's a one thing at a time thing, and yes, we want all these things together at the same time, but sometimes it's like working out what really is a priority at the moment. And at the moment, maybe it's the spread of the virus, because we don't know how predictable. It's not predictable at all. So even the latest outbreak in New Zealand, we don't know where it came from. At this stage, we don't know. Maybe something went under the radar, like some contact happened and it was not traceable. And things like that happen because of a personal freedom that someone had. So yeah, we have a lot of issues to deal with, and they're all bubbling to the surface. But then we have to go, okay, well, what is the thing we have to do now? What's our priority at the moment? Economy, yes, very important, but economy is not as important as a lot of people dying. So, it's very, very hard to lead a society through this process. It's very, very challenging, and you certainly can't please everyone. So, we are in really challenging times at the moment. Yeah,
absolutely. I guess there are several issues wrapped up here. First of all, there's the fact that we really don't know what this virus is, and therefore how it behaves. If you like, I mean, technically a virus isn't alive, but it certainly acts a certain way, and when it's in the bodies of humans, it seems to trigger certain reactions that are simply quite unpredictable. So, for example, we know that if you're older, perhaps, and you have certain ailments like diabetes, perhaps, then you're more susceptible. We know these things, but we don't know why, and we only find these things out through trial and error and all that. So, I guess the long and short of that is that perhaps everyone just needs to be a little bit more patient. And I know that's a bit of a stretch in a way, considering the lockdown itself has been a bit of a stretch already. But it's almost like we're all trying to maybe figure out what's going on. The authority is trying to figure out what's going on, and we actually don't have answers. And so we're all in this together in terms of this kind of unfolding chaos. And perhaps the least we can do is just try and be supportive, I think, and empathetic towards one another. And realizing that actually, ultimately, perhaps there is no one agreeable solution to blanket everyone. That's just not possible, because there are competing interests in society, for one. For example, I reflect on my days as a political activist on the far left and the far right, if you like, on politics. And I think it's fair to say that perhaps the difference between the left and the right would be that the left is more concerned about, the workers who prop up society, whereas the right is more concerned about the entrepreneurial business types who create the wealth that then gets distributed to society. So here's the thing: you cannot absolutely please everyone, because we all have to share a pie. And if someone wants more than one slice of a pie, they're not going to have their way, and they're going to say, "Oh, my freedoms are being curtailed." But well, just too bad. So there's this kind of balancing going on. Not everyone can have the absolute freedom, right? Because if everyone has their way, it would be madness, and there would be a lot of ills in society. So we have to find a way to manage us all, and to perhaps find, I don't know, perhaps a mutual second best scenario where everyone can say, "Okay, I can deal with this. Not my favorite way forward, but I can live with this." And so it's, I guess, finding some kind of compromise, because we all have to make sacrifices right now, and there have to be some kinds of trade-offs going on.
Yeah, it's a very interesting thing about compromise. The compromise is this connotation of you didn't get fully what you wanted, and you're just like, you're being cut short of something. So there's an element of the lack. I lacked 100%, so I compromise on 50%. Well, okay, I'll take it. Kind of thing. So you're settling for something second best. I think Tradeoffs as well has a similar sort of connotation, like, trade it off. What's the third one? What's the third? The compromise,
compromises, and trade-offs. Yeah, these three.
Sorry, the first one again?
Sacrifices.
Sacrifices. Yeah, sacrifices is like, I will give a part of myself. I've got a lot to say about sacrifices as a whole topic in itself, but I think in this context, I know what you mean. Now, the thing is, that's probably maybe the current way of seeing how we do things in society, or not getting, or reconciling what we may not get, what we ultimately want, and then we go, oh, okay, well, I'm not getting what I want. I spent a lot of time like reading and rereading listening to the audiobook of 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, and so I dive in quite deep into what Stephen Covey talks about in terms of the win-win or no deal situation. And he says, let's move away from the compromise kind of like model. But if you look at the intention, then we'll try to go, okay, well, this compromising sounds like losing anyway. So,
yes, it does.
you know, but if you could see it as like, you see the value of the interdependence that he talks about as well. Basically, it's the third model, which is what we want to strive for, cooperation, basically, interdependence. You always work towards win-win solutions, like what do you want and what do you want? Can we work together to create an ultimate let's say third outcome, the third outcome where we both what's the word, benefit from that arrangement as a result of the collaboration. So from that perspective, it sounds like a more of an abundance mindset. And I really kind of like that idea that maybe we got to change the framing around that, you know, like rather than see things as like, oh, I got to give up something to get something. It's more like, how can we work together so we get exactly what we need? And that takes a lot of communication. And I'm not so sure how far in society we are to have that natural, or do we need to still rely on the facilitation process to actually get it, and so that everyone's on the same page about it. So yeah, I don't really know if the terminology, the language behind compromise and trade-offs and sacrifice, in a way, it's a good starting point necessarily. It's a good point to start thinking about, because maybe that's how we are right now. But can we flip it? Can we change it? That's what I'm curious about. Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting. It would seem like perhaps the root of all this is really what we find present, perhaps, and persistent and pervasive throughout human history. If you look at the entire history of human conflict, the reason why we've warred and fought with each other and hated on each other and so forth, a lot of it has actually just been due to the fact that we cannot find a way to come together and work things through. Hence why we're doing this, even because we believe that there is room for sitting down together and working through issues that we may clash over. But I guess it's also fair to say that maybe what the world's going through right now with COVID is such that it's just, there's so much going on. And when we are in this kind of survival mode, it's fair to say, we kind of default to our primal instincts, and we do want to protect ourselves and loved ones. We try to minimize losses and maximize gains where possible. And so there is perhaps a bit more of an adversarial approach going on. If you think about how at the start of lockdowns around the world, and this is quite a phenomenon that seems to be pervasive everywhere, there were fights over, say, toilet paper and hand sanitizer. Man, so it's unbelievable, right? It's kind of hilarious, but it's always somewhat sad and tragic on a certain level too. So it's all those emotions mixed up in there, but it's very revealing. Actually, it's very revealing that when shit does hit the fan,
literally,
we will get off. Literally, we will get off. Literally, that shit hit the fan against the toilet paper demand. Yeah. But certainly, our claws stop coming out. Right? Our soiled claws come out, and we need that toilet paper. So, man, madness. But I know I just hope that this is just a one-off type of behavioral outburst or whatever. But I wonder if this reflects something deeper in the human psyche or human nature. I don't know. But I'm keen to hear your thoughts, because it'd be fair to say that I take perhaps more of a pessimistic view on some of these issues, whereas I think you take more of an optimistic view on things. So the bad cop has said his spiel. I'd like to hear from the good cop now.
That's why I'm here to create some balance in the dynamic.
Some balance, very much needed. So please balance me out. Some positive vibes, please.
Yeah. I mean, the whole thing about panic buying and toilet paper. The toilet paper is just a hilarious element in the whole panic buying saga, And that happened for the second time again last yesterday. Yeah, ridiculous.
Creatures of habit.
Yeah. But actually, it speaks a lot about our mindset, like how we operate as people, and it's also indicative of the larger society out there and how we're conditioned to believe about our resources. I think there was a study that like there's more food in this world to I don't know how many times I'm bad with stats and bad with figures, so I can't quote it with authority. But the basic intention was that there's more food in this world to feed all the population, I don't know, a few times over or whatever. And there shouldn't be starvation, there shouldn't be poverty and all that stuff.
There shouldn't be.
Yeah. But we have programmed ourselves into scarcity mindset, and some people can say, "Oh, we blame it on capitalism. We can blame it on capitalism." Markets have existed since humanity has existed. All comes down to trading of resources. So, but okay, never mind. I think it's just part of the situation. Now, the thing is, resources are what drives people into feeling of scarcity or abundance, and maybe what this current system has exacerbated is the feeling of more and more lack, especially when there's a big unequal wage income gap, and we got a bunch of billionaires that we talk about, and a bunch of really, really poor people out there. Stricken in poverty, and then we got this ladder that we're climbing, and it's competition and all this stuff. It's around the whole concept of like not enough. So maybe then advertisements come along and they appeal to that not enough, and they say, oh, if you get this new product, you might feel just the thing that you're seeking, the happiness. Not enough happiness. This product will give you happiness. Not enough status. All right, buy this car and it will give you status. Because you don't feel as though you got enough status. That kind of thing. Yes. So, but it's a play. And you can say, oh, it's the corporations that are coming out of that. No. It's actually ingrained in our human psyche,
Absolutely.
So I feel that it's hard to shift out of that mindset because naturally we are designed for survival. And if our survivability is based on the amount of resources that we have, money or house and assets, then maybe we are designed to look at those things and go, scarce. But the abundance mindset, the one for interdependence, I think is where you start to acknowledge the things that one would possibly be really rich in. Balance it off with something. It's not about the physical resources. I know it's important, yes, but we can have enough. And we can have enough, and by that have a lower paying job, and then we have abundance of time to do what we really need to do. Spend time with our friends, our family, our kids, with our aging parents, whatever, those things that actually give us joy in our lives. We can take a dance class, we can go for travel and stuff, because you got abundance of that space. And then when you got friends and people they can communicate with, and you go, I've got abundance of people who care about me. And that's actually not necessarily reframing it from the scarcity mindset, but to acknowledge the things that you otherwise take for granted. And this go actually, well, no, there's abundance. Actually, there's abundance. Realistically speaking, there's abundance. I've got abundance of safety. I've got a car. I've got a lot of opportunities. I've got abundance of privilege. In some cases, all relative. And then when you start to weigh it out like that, then you just go, oh, well, hang on, maybe I'm not that scarce after all. If I got an abundance of patience, maybe I don't need it tomorrow either. So.
Absolutely. That's right. Well, you know what I think is going on right now is that because COVID has really spun us all out of control in one way, shape, or form, we're actually having to, rejig these balances again. And I think a good analogy for this would be, if you're a musician, I think you can relate to this. And I had these experiences where, I've got my amp settings all nicely set, and then someone messes with them, and it messes with my mind because I just tweaked it to those levels, and I wanted them exactly like that, and someone's messed with it, and it irritates me, and I don't know how to quite get it back to how I wanted it previously. And you could say that for a lot of people who are trying to adjust to their new normal now, they're trying to tweak all these abnormalities that we're seeing now, all these disturbances, all these upheavals, and they're trying to get it back to where it was, and they're finding it tough. And so in some areas they're feeling maybe there's a bit of a diminishment, a lack there, and in other areas, okay, maybe there's an abundance of things and there's an excess. And so this is actually an axis where finding balance is extremely tricky. And we're talking about lack and excess as these real polar opposites that really shape a lot of our behaviors. And you could say that shape the way society itself is organized, because we're all competing for essentially what are finite resources. And we actually haven't found a way to live in harmony yet in this regard. And there seems to be an ongoing saga. So
on a final note, I do want to mention that's why a lot of practices, whether religious, spiritual, or even just being a good person, they talk about gratitude, and we think, cheesy, yes, yeah, okay, but the gratitude exercises do actually bring awareness to the things that we are actually abundant in, and therefore, thankful to have. Now the key is, do we take it for granted? And that's an attitudinal problem, like it's entitlement, like, I should have more. But what about the things you already have?
That's so true. Yes.
That brings in a whole new dynamic into this, because then you go, whoa, hang on, I'm guilty as well of entitlement, because I don't give gratitude enough. Like, sobering.
Oh, absolutely, yes. Entitlements and expectations, these certainly come to the fore. And I think, it's fair to say, again, with the pandemic, we have seen how there's a lot of things that we've just simply taken for granted. And now we realize, there's actually all this that goes into that. For example, the toilet paper shortage. We don't realize that actually this comes from a warehouse that people have to, pack them, deliver them. And there's a real long chain of command going on there, but we don't think about these things. We aren't mindful. We just go in there, we take what we want and we leave, and that's it. It's very mindless. And now perhaps we are forced to be more mindful. And maybe some people find this uncomfortable. They don't want to have to think about these unpleasantries in life. Yeah. So.
Yeah, totally.
So I do wonder if this might actually deserve a deeper dive for a future discussion, because this topic of perhaps gratitude and looking for abundance and taking stock and all those issues wrapped in together, we need to go deep into it again.
Yeah, the abundance and the paradox of choice.
Yeah.
Maybe there's a scarcity of choice, and abundance of options is scarcity of choice.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
it's a tipping of scales, isn't it? Sorry. It's a tipping of scales, because when you have perhaps an overabundance of something, there will be an undersupply of something else, and so finding the right balance is tricky. We're going through a bit of a seesaw experience right now, and it's I guess making us a bit maybe not seasick, land sick. I don't know what's going on, but we are certainly finding it difficult to perhaps keep grounded in these tumultuous times. And it's fair to say we need to find a way just to find its center again, perhaps somehow.
Totally.
A lot more to talk about. Well,
but for now,
we'll end on that, and we'll leave the abundance of subjects for subsequent discussions. Yes, let's do that.
That's right.
All right.